She said it was just dinner. But one confession under candlelight tore apart everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and my marriage. I still remember the moment her words slipped into my life, disguised as something simple, something harmless. "It's just dinner," she had said, her voice carrying that calm, confident tone she always seemed to have. But behind it, I caught something else. A faint hesitation, like she wasn't entirely sure if it was dinner she was asking for, or something deeper. She was a woman I'd known for years in passing, admired, really, though never too closely. She carried herself with the kind of grace that made a crowded room feel smaller the moment she walked in. Mid-40s, with a smile that could warm the air around her, and eyes that told stories even when her lips didn't. That afternoon, when she reached out to me, I wasn't expecting it. I had been going about my day, restless but steady, when she appeared. She touched my forearm lightly, the way someone might to get your attention without saying a word. Her hand was warm, her fingers soft but sure, and even after she pulled away, I could still feel the imprint on my skin. "You've been working too hard," she said with an almost teasing smile. "Come have dinner with me tonight." Just dinner. I laughed, though quietly, because something about her phrasing caught me off guard. Just dinner. She made it sound simple, almost casual, and yet it didn't feel casual at all. The way her eyes lingered on mine a moment too long, the faint curve of her lips, the slight pause before she spoke, it all hinted at something unsaid. Inside, I hesitated. A voice in me whispered that this was more than an invitation for food, more than a friendly evening. Another voice argued back, asking what harm could possibly come from one meal, one conversation. I told her yes, maybe too quickly, maybe too easily. Her smile deepened then, softer now, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw relief in her expression. After she walked away, I stood there replaying the moment, every detail sharper than it should have been. The subtle scent of her perfume, a gentle floral note that lingered in the air after she passed. The sway of her hair as it caught the late light. The warmth in her eyes that seemed to reach places I hadn't let anyone touch in years. The truth is, I should have known even then. A dinner doesn't carry that much weight unless something more is hidden behind it. She hadn't needed to touch me when she asked. She hadn't needed to look at me that way. But she did. And I said yes. At the time, it felt small, just another evening ahead. But looking back, that simple invitation was the first step onto a path I never imagined walking. It was the moment a single thread began to unravel, quietly, gently, until it pulled apart everything I thought was secure. That night was never just dinner. It was the beginning of everything that followed. The restaurant she chose wasn't extravagant, but it carried a kind of quiet elegance that made the world outside feel far away. Small tables, dim golden lights strung above, and the faint sound of a piano drifting from somewhere unseen. It wasn't crowded. In fact, it felt as though the entire place had slowed its breathing just to let us be there. When I arrived, she was already seated near the window. A single candle flickered between us, its glow brushing her face in a way that softened every line, every feature. For a moment, I stood still, watching her. She wasn't dressed to impress, not in the obvious sense. A dark blouse, a pair of earrings that caught the light when she tilted her head. Understated, but somehow striking. It wasn't what she wore that unsettled me. It was the calm poise with which she carried herself, the quiet confidence that seemed to say she knew exactly who she was. When her eyes lifted and found mine, she smiled. And it was different from the smile she'd given me earlier. Softer, gentler, almost like it belonged only to that moment. "I'm glad you came," she said as I slid into the chair opposite her. Her voice was steady, yet it carried a note of something unspoken, as if the words themselves meant more than they revealed. I tried to settle into the rhythm of conversation, but everything felt heightened. The clink of glasses, the low murmur of other tables, even the way the candle swayed when she leaned forward slightly. It all pressed itself into my awareness. We talked about work, about the day, about the little ordinary things that fill the space before truth arrives. And yet, even in the ordinary, there was a charge. Her laughter wasn't careless. It was deliberate, like it surprised her each time it escaped. And when she laughed, she would tilt her head back ever so slightly, exposing the curve of her neck in the candlelight. It made me want to look away and look closer all at once. At one point, she reached for a dish in the center of the table at the same time I did. Our fingers brushed, just a passing moment, but the spark it left lingered in the air between us. She glanced up quickly, meeting my eyes, and neither of us spoke for a beat too long. Then she smiled again, but this time her smile trembled at the edges, as though she felt it too. The evening moved slowly, almost deliberately. Her stories unfolded in layers, and I found myself drawn in, not just by the words, but by the way she told them, with her hands, with her eyes, with those pauses that seemed to hang just a little too heavy before she went on. And as I sat there, listening, watching, I realized this was not the kind of dinner you forget. Something deeper was tugging at the surface, waiting, pressing, almost daring us both to name it. It was supposed to be just dinner, but already it felt like the beginning of a secret. Somewhere between the second glass of wine and the last bite of bread, her voice shifted. It wasn't a change anyone else would notice, but I felt it instantly. The brightness in her tone softened, the laughter gave way to pauses, and her words began to carry weight. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass, not drinking, just circling it absently. Her eyes weren't on me at first. They were fixed on the candle, on the thin flame flickering with every quiet movement in the room. When she finally spoke, her words came slowly, like she had been carrying them in her chest for too long. "Do you ever feel like people stop seeing you?" she asked, her voice barely above the hum of the restaurant. I wasn't sure how to answer, but the way she said it didn't feel like a question that needed solving. It felt like an opening, a doorway she was holding just wide enough for me to glimpse through. I told her yes, that I understood in my own way, and something in her eyes shifted then, softening, as if my answer gave her permission to go further. She spoke of her home, of her marriage, not in bitterness, but in a quiet honesty that ached more than anger ever could. She admitted she felt invisible at times, that she moved through her own house like a shadow passing through rooms. "He doesn't mean to," she whispered, more to herself than to me. But I could stand in front of him and still not be seen. Her words settled heavy between us. I watched her fingers pause against the glass before slowly pulling away, resting lightly on the table. Almost unconsciously, her hand shifted closer to mine. I felt the brush of her knuckles against my own, light, hesitant, like a question she was too careful to ask aloud. My pulse quickened. I didn't move away. Instead, I let the moment hang there, suspended in the space between touch and meaning. She glanced down at our hands, then back up at me. Her lips curved into the faintest, most fragile smile I'd ever seen from her. A smile that said she was exposing more than she should, and yet couldn't stop herself. I wanted to reach for her, to tell her she wasn't invisible. But I didn't. The restraint felt almost painful, but I knew the weight of this moment lay not in action, but in acknowledgement. Her confession wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but it was raw. And in the flicker of candlelight, it pressed into me with more force than any declaration could. That night, over untouched dessert and cooling coffee, I realized something had shifted. We were no longer two people having dinner. We were two people carefully stepping into a space where truths lived. Truths we weren't sure the world was ready to hear. And though the world outside still moved, in that moment, it felt like the only sound that mattered was the quiet rhythm of her words, and the faint, deliberate brush of her hand against mine. By the time the plates had been cleared, I could feel the weight of something unsaid pressing between us. She had grown quieter, her words slower, as though each one was weighed before it left her lips. The candle had burned low, its flame bending and swaying in the draft, casting her face in shifting light. She held her glass but didn't drink. Instead, she turned it slowly in her hand, the stem catching the glow. I could tell she was gathering courage, not the kind you muster in an instant, but the kind that builds over years of silence, waiting for a single night when it can finally break free. When her eyes lifted to mine, I knew something was about to change. I lied to you earlier, she said softly, her voice rougher than before. It isn't just dinner. The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling out until they touched every corner of me. I felt my chest tighten, my pulse quicken. She exhaled, steadying herself, and continued. My marriage. She paused, swallowing hard. It hasn't been real for a long time. We share a house, but not a life. We exist in the same rooms, but we don't see each other. And tonight, she hesitated again, her voice breaking on the edge of her confession. Tonight, I wanted to be seen. Her words struck something deep inside me, something I didn't even realize had been waiting to hear them. There was no bitterness in her tone, no sharpness. Only truth, spoken like it hurt her to admit it out loud. I searched her face, every line etched with both strength and fragility. She wasn't asking for pity. She wasn't even asking for forgiveness. She was simply laying her truth bare in front of me, a truth she had held behind careful smiles and practiced composure for far too long. My hand moved before I thought. I reached across the table and laid it gently over hers. Her skin was warm, trembling faintly, and when she turned her palm upward to meet mine, it felt like an unspoken vow. Her eyes glistened in the low light. She blinked once, then again, and a tear threatened to fall but didn't. She squeezed my hand instead, grounding herself in the small act of connection. For a long time we sat like that. No waiter interrupting, no clock reminding us of the hour. Just two hands pressed together, and the quiet truth that this was no longer a harmless evening. I should have pulled away. I should have told myself it was too much, that it was dangerous to step into the empty spaces of someone else's life. But I didn't, because in her voice, in her trembling honesty, I recognized something that mirrored my own hidden restlessness. That night, her secret didn't just change the way I saw her. It changed the way I saw myself. And though the room remained full of murmured conversations and clinking glasses, it felt like the world had gone silent, holding its breath as her words settled between us. It wasn't just dinner. It had never been. We left the restaurant later than either of us expected. The air outside was cool, the kind that wakes your senses after a warm room filled with food and wine. Streetlights stretched their glow across the pavement, and the night carried the faint scent of rain that hadn't yet fallen. We walked slowly, almost deliberately, as if our footsteps were conspiring to extend the evening. She wrapped her arms loosely around herself, not shivering but thoughtful. I offered my jacket, and though she declined with a smile, she moved just a little closer to me, her shoulder brushing mine every few steps. Our conversation shifted. Gone were the practiced smiles, the casual questions. The night seemed to strip away pretense. We spoke of quieter things, the way certain memories linger longer than they should, the silence of empty rooms, the fear of being misunderstood. Her voice had softened now, no longer carrying the careful restraint it had at dinner. It was more intimate, almost as if she were speaking only to me, even though the street around us was alive with distant sounds. At one point, we stopped near a row of shuttered shops, their windows dark but still reflecting the glow of the street lamps. She turned slightly toward me, her expression caught between hesitation and openness. The closeness of her body was suddenly unmistakable, the kind of nearness that makes you hyper-aware of every detail, the warmth radiating from her, the faint perfume that lingered on her blouse, the rhythm of her breathing as it slowed. I asked her if she was all right. She nodded, but the nod was small, almost fragile. It's just, I don't remember the last time I felt this alive, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Her words lingered in the night air, heavier than any silence could have been. I didn't respond right away. I didn't trust my voice to carry the weight of what I was feeling. Instead, I let the moment exist, let the vulnerability between us deepen without trying to name it. She glanced down, then back up at me. Her eyes held mine, steady and unflinching, and in them I saw both the courage it had taken to speak and the fear of what it meant. The next step we took brought us closer still, until her arm brushed against mine with each movement. She didn't pull away, and neither did I. The small touches felt louder than words, like each one was rewriting the boundaries we thought we understood. We walked on, but slower now, as though the night itself was conspiring to hold us in its grip. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't thinking about where we were going, only about the steps we hadn't yet taken. The silence still stretched between us, and the truth that had already begun to change everything. The evening wasn't ending. It was unfolding. And with every breath, every touch, every glance, I understood. We were no longer simply sharing time. We were lingering inside something fragile, something unspoken, that neither of us was ready to let go. Her house wasn't far. By the time we reached it, the streets had grown quieter, the night settling into that hush that makes every sound feel amplified. The echo of our footsteps, the faint rustle of leaves stirred by the breeze, even the rhythm of her breathing beside me. When we stopped at her gate, neither of us spoke at first. She rested her hand on the latch but didn't move to open it. Instead, she turned toward me, her face caught in the pale glow of the porch light. There was something unguarded in her expression now, something almost vulnerable. "I should go in," she said finally, her voice soft, but it carried none of the certainty she usually had. I nodded, but I didn't step back. My body refused to create the distance my mind knew was safer. She looked at me for a long time, as though she were searching for an answer she wasn't sure she wanted to find. Then, almost reluctantly, her lips curved into a small smile. "Do you know what I feel right now?" she asked. I shook my head, though my chest tightened at the question. "I feel alive," she whispered, and as the words left her, her eyes glistened. "It's been so long since I felt that." The air between us thickened, charged with something unsaid but undeniable. I wanted to tell her I felt it too, that this night had stirred something in me I hadn't known was waiting. But the words caught in my throat. Then she stepped closer. Just one step, but it erased the safe space that had existed between us. I could feel her presence now, the warmth radiating from her body, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the cool night air. Her hand lifted slowly, hesitantly, until her fingertips brushed against my cheek. The touch was light, almost testing, as though she wasn't sure if she had permission to close that final distance. Her thumb traced a line along my jaw, gentle and lingering, sending a current through me that rooted me to the spot. I didn't move, couldn't. For a moment, it felt as if time had folded in on itself. Her face was inches from mine, her breath warm against my skin, her forehead tilted toward mine until they nearly touched, and in that suspended space, the world fell away. There was only her hand on my face, her eyes searching mine, and the silent ache of everything we wanted but didn't dare take. We didn't kiss. That restraint, that choice not to, made the moment ache even more. It was a boundary held, but barely. A pause drawn so tightly it felt like a breaking point. When she finally lowered her hand, I felt its absence like a cold rush against my skin. She whispered goodnight, almost reluctantly, and turned to open the gate. I stood there longer than I should have, watching her silhouette fade into the warm glow of her doorway, feeling the quiet thud of my own heartbeat echoing what hers had left behind. That night ended without a touch of lips, without a single promise spoken. And yet, it was the most intimate moment of my life. The moment of truth didn't arrive with shouting or a dramatic outburst. It came softly, almost too gently, in a tone so calm it felt sinister. We were sitting across from each other, the untouched plates between us, the dim glow of the restaurant's candlelight flickering like it was trembling with me. She lowered her gaze, her voice steady but low, and said the words that cracked the foundation of my life. "It wasn't just dinner. It's been going on for months." At first, my brain refused to process it. I blinked at her, sure I had misheard. The clinking of silverware at nearby tables, the soft murmur of other diners, the faint notes of a piano in the background. All of it became unbearably loud in that moment. The world didn't stop when my marriage shattered. People laughed at nearby tables. Waiters passed by with trays of wine glasses. Life continued, while mine broke apart in silence. I searched her face, hoping for hesitation, hoping for a smile that would tell me this was some kind of cruel joke. But there was no smile, no hesitation. Only guilt that hung heavy in her eyes. My heart pounded against my chest, begging me to say something, anything. Instead, I felt the weight of betrayal crush me into silence. She tried to explain, her words tumbling out like fragile glass shattering on the floor. She said she hadn't meant for it to happen. She said she felt lonely, that the spark in our marriage had dimmed, that she had convinced herself it was just harmless at first. Harmless conversations, harmless dinners, until it wasn't harmless anymore. Each word pierced me like a dagger. For years, I had trusted her with my deepest fears, my biggest dreams, my very soul. And in one confession, I realized I had been living in an illusion. My mind raced back to every late night she said she was working late, every text she guarded a little too carefully, every "don't wait up," she whispered casually. The signs had been there, but I had chosen to believe in her, in us. Anger rose within me like a storm, but it collided with heartbreak, leaving me paralyzed in the middle. I wanted to slam my fists on the table. I wanted to walk away and never look back. But I also wanted to demand why wasn't I enough? Why did she trade our vows for secrecy? Why didn't she come to me before choosing someone else? The hardest part wasn't just hearing the truth. It was the realization that she had sat across from me for months, smiling, laughing, holding my hand, all while holding a different secret in her heart. The life I thought we had built together, the love story I believed was unshakable, had been nothing more than fragile glass, waiting for one confession to make it crumble. That night, over a table set for two, my marriage ended. Not with a fight, not with a scream, but with a confession whispered under candlelight. The moment of truth didn't arrive with shouting or a dramatic outburst. It came softly, almost too gently, in a tone so calm it felt sinister. We were sitting across from each other, the untouched plates between us, the dim glow of the restaurant's candlelight flickering like it was trembling with me. She lowered her gaze, her voice steady but low, and said the words that cracked the foundation of my life. It wasn't just dinner. It's been going on for months. At first, my brain refused to process it. I blinked at her, sure I had misheard. The clinking of silverware at nearby tables, the soft murmur of other diners, the faint notes of a piano in the background. All of it became unbearably loud in that moment. The world didn't stop when my marriage shattered. People laughed at nearby tables. Waiters passed by with trays of wine glasses. Life continued, while mine broke apart in silence. I searched her face, hoping for hesitation, hoping for a smile that would tell me this was some kind of cruel joke. But there was no smile, no hesitation. Only guilt that hung heavy in her eyes. My heart pounded against my chest, begging me to say something, anything. Instead, I felt the weight of betrayal crush me into silence. She tried to explain, her words tumbling out like fragile glass shattering on the floor. She said she hadn't meant for it to happen. She said she felt lonely, that the spark in our marriage had dimmed, that she had convinced herself it was just harmless at first. Harmless conversations, harmless dinners, until it wasn't harmless anymore. Each word pierced me like a dagger. For years, I had trusted her with my deepest fears, my biggest dreams, my very soul. And in one confession, I realized I had been living in an illusion. My mind raced back to every late night she said she was working late, every text she guarded a little too carefully, every "don't wait up," she whispered casually. The signs had been there, but I had chosen to believe in her, in us. Anger rose within me like a storm, but it collided with heartbreak, leaving me paralyzed in the middle. I wanted to slam my fists on the table. I wanted to walk away and never look back. But I also wanted to demand why wasn't I enough? Why did she trade our vows for secrecy? Why didn't she come to me before choosing someone else? The hardest part wasn't just hearing the truth. It was the realization that she had sat across from me for months, smiling, laughing, holding my hand, all while holding a different secret in her heart. The life I thought we had built together, the love story I believed was unshakable, had been nothing more than fragile glass, waiting for one confession to make it crumble. That night, Over a table set for two, my marriage ended. Not with a fight, not with a scream, but with a confession whispered under candlelight. High voltage. If you've ever trusted someone completely, only to be blindsided by their secret, you know the pain I felt that night. What would you have done in my place? Walk away or fight to save what was left? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the next part of this true story. The heartbreaking aftermath. R9.